Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Giri Varadari Yashodanandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashodanandana Brajajana Ranjana Yamunatira Vanachari Yamunatira Vanachari Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Shri Radha Madhava ki, Shri Radha Radhanath ki. Jaya Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrakacharya Stotra Shata Shri Srimad A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki, BBT founder Srila Prabhupada ki, ISKCON Samstapakacharya Srila Prabhupada ki, Mantra Upasaka Srila Prabhupada ki, Senapati Bhakta Srila Prabhupada ki, Savior of the whole world Srila Prabhupada ki, Preeminent Shiksha Guru Srila Prabhupada ki, Jaya Om Vishnupada Paramahamsa Parivrakacharya Stotra Shata Shri Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Goswami Maharaj Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda ki, Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki, Prem se ko Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki, Shri Gopa Gopinath Shama Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhan ki, Shri Vrindavan Dham ki, Mayapur Dham ki, Ganga Maya ki, Yamuna Maya ki, Tulsi Maharani ki, Bhakti Devi ki, Sama Veta Bhakta Vrinda ki, Gaura Premananda. All glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to assembled devotees, all glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Today we're reading from Srila Prabhupada's Lilamrta. We're continuing with the chapter, A Threat Against ISKCON. Before we start, we can chant Prabhupada's pranam mantras together. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine. On July 31st, Prabhupada wrote Brahmananda and Garga Muni, explaining why he was leaving for India. In order to set example to my other sannyasi students, I am personally going to Japan with a party of 3 other sannyasi students. Although it is beyond my physical condition, still I am going out so that you may learn the responsibility of sannyas. I am fervently appealing to you all not to create fracture in the solid body of the society. Please work conjointly without any personal ambition. That will help the cause. It is the injunction of the Vedas that the spiritual master should not be treated as ordinary man. Even sometimes the spiritual master behaves like ordinary man. It is the duty of the disciple to accept him as a superhuman man. In the beginning of your letter, your comparison of the soldier and the commander is very appropriate. We are on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, one side Maya, the other side Krishna. So the regulative principles of a battlefield, namely to abide by the order of the commander, must be followed. Otherwise it is impossible to direct the fighting capacity of the soldiers and thus defeat the opposing elements. Kindly therefore take courage. Let things be rightly done so that our mission may be correctly pushed forward to come out victorious. Prabhupada wrote other letters revealing his plans to travel to India. Our life is very short. The Krishna consciousness movement is not meant for fulfilling one's personal ambition, but it is a serious movement for the whole world. I am therefore going to the Eastern Hemisphere, beginning from Japan. We are going 4 in a party, and all of us are sannyasis. In this old age, I am going with this party just to set an example to my disciples who have taken recently the sannyas order. In preparation for Prabhupada's trip to India, Prabhupada's secretary, Devananda, now Devananda Swami, asked him questions from the immigration form, mechanically reading the questions and filling in the answers as Prabhupada replied. Have you ever committed any criminal acts? Devananda asked, reading from the form. Prabhupada's eyes widened. You are asking your spiritual master if he did anything criminal? And he turned to Bhagavan. You see, I am simply surrounded by people I cannot trust. It is a dangerous situation. Prabhupada sat in his garden the night before his departure. Don't be disturbed, he told the disciples with him. We are not going backward, we are going forward. I will reveal everything to you. I will rectify. His strong words and criticisms, he said, had been to enlighten his disciples, to warn them and show them the subtleties of Maya. Karandara mentioned that the temple leaders had arranged that only a few devotees go with Prabhupada the next day to the airport. Where did this idea come from? Prabhupada asked. Srimad Bhagavatam instructs that when a saintly person leaves your company, all present should follow the departing vehicle as far as possible until it is out of sight. So the next day, the devotees all accompanied Prabhupada, chanting and dancing behind him, through through the long corridors of Los Angeles International Airport. After many months with them, he was now leaving. Devotees cried. Prabhupada, dressed in new garments, his head freshly shaven, looked effulgent. He sat in the departure lounge, head held high, as grave and unfathomable as ever. He was embarking on a new adventure for Lord Chaitanya. He was old and might not return, he said, but his disciples should continue the Krishna consciousness movement seriously. If you follow this new schedule, he said, you will keep Maya from attacking. And then he left them. En route to Japan, Prabhupada stopped overnight in Hawaii. He stayed in a motel, and Gaurasundar and Govinda Dasi came to talk with him. Govinda Dasi wanted Prabhupada to stay and install their deities of Radha and Krishna in the temple. If Gaurasundar agreed, Prabhupada said, he would stay a few days longer to perform the deity installation. Let me consult. Gaurasundar replied, and the next day Prabhupada flew to Japan. From Japan, Prabhupada wrote Govinda Dasi. It is very encouraging to learn that people inquired about me and were eager to hear my speaking. I could have stayed 1 or 2 more days. There was no hurry, but you did not make any arrangement. I personally proposed to Gaurasundar that I shall install the deities, and he replied that, let me consult. But he never informed me of the result of the consultation and with whom he had to consult. So this is the present situation in our ISKCON society. It is clear that a great mischievous propaganda is lightly made, and the effect has created a very unfavorable situation, and I am very much afflicted in this connection. Still, there is time to save the society out of this mischievous propaganda, and I hope all of you combine together to do the needful. At the Tokyo airport, Prabhupada was greeted by executives of Dai Nippon Printing Company, the printers of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and the 20,000 monthly copies of Back to Godhead. Prabhupada and his entourage rode in a limousine, courtesy of Dai Nippon, to a small private apartment about 45 minutes from the temple. Prabhupada had developed a severe cough and several other symptoms of ill health due, he said, to his disciples' behavior. Yet despite his illness, he would talk for hours on his concern for ISKCON, especially with his traveling GBC secretary, Tamal Krishna. Soon after their arrival in Japan, Prabhupada's secretary received a disturbing call from a devotee attending the society-wide Janmashtami celebration at New Vrindavan. 4 of the newly initiated sannyasis had arrived, the devotee said, and were teaching a strange philosophy. Devotees were confused. Prabhupada had left America. The sannyasis were saying because he had rejected his disciples. The sannyasis were blaming themselves and other disciples for not realizing that Prabhupada was actually Krishna. When Prabhupada heard this, he said, "That is why I did not go. I knew this would happen. This is impersonalism." He defined the Mayavada impersonal misconception of the Guru and Krishna. If one says that the Guru is God, or if the Guru himself says that he is God, that is Mayavad philosophy. For the Mayavadis, spiritual realization is realization of one's identity with Brahman, the all-pervading spirit. Despite their austerities and their detachment from material society, and despite their study of Vedanta Sutra and the commentaries of Shankara, they mistakenly think that Krishna's body, name, pastimes, service, and devotees are all facets of Maya or illusion. Therefore they are called Mayavadis. A Mayavad spiritual master does not reveal to his disciple the holy name of Krishna, the holy pastimes of Krishna, or the transcendental form of Krishna, since the Mayavadi considers all these Maya. Instead, the Guru explains the oneness of all things, teaching the disciple that the concept of separate existence and ego is illusion. The Mayavadis sometimes compare the Guru to a ladder. One uses the ladder to reach a higher position, but if the ladder is no longer needed, one kicks it away. Coughing intermittently and speaking with physical discomfort, Prabhupada explained the Mayavadis' dangerous misconceptions. The impersonalists held a cheap, mundane view of the Guru's worship, and the Guru's instructions. If one says that the Guru is God, and God is not a person, then it follows logically that the Guru has no eternal personal relationship with his disciples. Ultimately, the disciple will become equal to the Guru, or in other words, he will realize that he too is God. Arguing from the Vedic scripture, Prabhupada refuted the Mayavadis' claims. The individual souls, he said, are Krishna's eternal servants, and this master-servant relationship is eternal. Service to Krishna, therefore, is spiritual activity. Only by serving the Guru, however, can a disciple fully revive his eternal relationship with Krishna. The Vedic literature gives paramount importance to serving the spiritual master. He is the representative of God, the direct, manifest link to God. No one can approach God but through him. Lord Krishna says, "Those who are directly my devotees are actually not my devotees, but those who are devotees of my servant, the spiritual master, are factually my devotees." For hours Prabhupada drilled his disciples. He would pose a Mayavad argument, then ask his disciples to defeat it. Shri Shri Radha Radhana ki, Srila Prabhupada ki. If they failed, he would defeat it himself. He stressed that the relationship between the spiritual master and disciple was eternal, not because the Guru was Krishna, but because he was the confidential servant of Krishna eternally. A bona fide spiritual master never says that he is Krishna or that Krishna is impersonal. The devotees began to understand how the offenses of minimizing Srila Prabhupada's position were products of Mayavad philosophy. For the Mayavadi, to increase devotion to the Guru is unnecessary. If individual relationships are all ultimately illusion, why increase the illusion? If the master-servant relationship is ultimately illusion, then the less the disciple see his Guru as master and himself as servant, the more he is advancing. The Mayavad philosophy was a subtle and insidious poison. At least Prabhupada had been spared the pain of being personally present in New Vrindavan to witness the Mayavada rantings of certain of his disciples, the appalling display of ignorance of most of the others. He had his small entourage and was on his way to preach in India, while here in Tokyo, he would try to obtain many Back to Godhead magazines and Krishna books to take with him. Prabhupada observed Janmashtami at his apartment by having disciples read aloud to him from Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, throughout the day. If they kept reading, he said, they might be able to finish the book in one day. The devotees had decorated Prabhupada's room with leaves and flowers strung from the ceiling and along the walls, and Prabhupada sat on a thin mattress behind his low desk, hearing the pastimes of Krishna. At 9 p.m., after fasting all day, the devotees were still reading to him when he asked if they would be able to finish the book by midnight. The devotees replied that they would not. Then you stop and I will read. Prabhupada opened a Sanskrit volume of the 10th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam and for the next 2 hours chanted the Sanskrit verses. You cannot understand Sanskrit, he said, but I know you can feel. The verses are so potent that just by hearing one can be purified. During the reading, Kirtananda Swami and Kartikeya Swami cooked a feast in the kitchen. At midnight, the devotees served Srila Prabhupada the Janmashtami feast. Taking only a few bites, he watched his disciples eat heartily. The next day was Vyasa Puja, Prabhupada's 74th birthday, and he went to the Tokyo ISKCON temple. The temple was only 2 rooms, one for living, one for worshipping, with Japanese grass mats on the floor. Prabhupada sat to the right of the altar, looking at Lord Jagannath, while his disciples sat on the floor before him, singing Guru Ashtaka, prayers glorifying the spiritual master. None of them, however, knew exactly how to conduct the Vyasa Puja ceremony, and after a while they ended the kirtan. In the painfully awkward moments that followed, the devotees realized they were supposed to do something special. But what? Prabhupada appeared angry. Don't you have Pushpa Yatra? Isn't prasadam ready? The devotees looked at one another. This is not Vyasa Puja, Prabhupada said. You have not been to Vyasa Puja before. Don't you know how to celebrate the Vyasa Puja? How to honor the spiritual master? One of the syasis began to cry. Tamal Krishna, Prabhupada said, didn't you see how I observed my Guru Maharaja's birthday? Where is Pushpa? Pushpa is Sanskrit for flowers. Pushpa? Pushpa. Tamal Krishna decided Prabhupada must mean Pushpana, a fancy rice dish. I'm not sure, he said. What kind of Vyasa Puja is this with no Pushpa? Prabhupada asked. We can get some, Prabhupada, Tamal Krishna offered. Tamal Krishna grabbed Sudam. Prabhupada wants prasadam. He wants Pushpana rice. They ran into the kitchen and hurriedly started the rice. Meanwhile, in the temple, the devotees struggled through their version of a Vyasa Puja ceremony. Kirtananda Swami stood and began to read aloud from the introduction of Krishna, the reservoir of pleasure, which included a short biography of Prabhupada, But Prabhupada interrupted, scolding his disciples for concocting and for acting improperly. "If you don't know," he said, "then why didn't you ask me how to do this properly?" The Japanese guests present didn't understand English, but they could see the spiritual master was disturbed. Prabhupada explained that in devotional service, everything must be done properly, according to the parampara method, without concocting. "We will observe Vyasa Puja again tomorrow," he said. "Come to my room. I will tell you what to do." The next day, after a simple traditional ceremony, the devotees felt ecstatic. Afterward, they agreed, when one displeases his spiritual master, there is no happiness. But as soon as the spiritual master is pleased, the disciples become blissful. The Janmashtami Vyasa Puja festival in New Vrindavan had become a nightmare. Hundreds of devotees had converged there from the East Coast, with many others from California and even Europe. They had come for a blissful festival, but instead had found Srila Prabhupada's newly initiated sannyasis expounding a devastating philosophy. The sannyasis, speaking informally to groups here and there, would explain how the devotees had offended Prabhupada and how he had subsequently withdrawn his mercy. The sannyasis revealed their special insights that Prabhupada was actually God, that none of his disciples had recognized him as such, and that all of them, therefore beginning with the sannyasis, were guilty of minimizing his position. And that was why Prabhupada left for India. He had withdrawn his mercy from his disciples. The devotees were devastated. None of them knew what to say in reply. The sannyasis, by their preaching, had projected gloom everywhere, which was proper, they said. Everyone should feel guilty and realize that they had lost the grace of their spiritual master. No use trying to cheer one another up by chanting Hare Krishna or eating a feast. Everyone should accept the bitter medicine. Although Prabhupada had given his disciples 3 volumes of Srimad Bhagavatam, as well as Bhagavad Gita as it is, the nectar of devotion, teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and other literature, none of the devotees were well versed in them. Many devotees wondered if the philosophy of the sannyasis were preaching was correct, but none of them knew enough of the scriptures to immediately refute it. The devotees turned to the new GBC men, Prabhupada appointed leaders and guardians of ISKCON. The GBC, along with other senior devotees, began carefully searching through Prabhupada's books to ascertain exactly what he had said about the position of the spiritual master. Then Hayagriva announced that a letter had just arrived from Srila Prabhupada in Tokyo. As soon as the devotees all gathered under the pavilion roof to hear, Hayagriva read aloud, "My dear sons and daughters," and then Prabhupada listed almost all the new Vrindavan residents. The devotees immediately felt a wave of hope just to hear Prabhupada say, "My dear sons and daughters," was a great relief. Hayagriva continued to read, "Please accept my blessings." Prabhupada hadn't rejected them. The letter went on to say that Srila Prabhupada was pleased with the work of the new Vrindavan devotees, and he promised to come and visit them. Soon he would send for other devotees to join him in India, he said. As he described what preaching in India would be like, the devotees became caught up in the momentum of Srila Prabhupada's preaching spirit. They cheered they felt blissful. Then Prabhupada specifically referred to the difficulty facing ISKCON. Purge out of the new Vrindavan the non-Vrindavan atmosphere that has entered. His letter turned the tide against the Mayavad teachings. The GBC then called a meeting for all disciples in the temple room. Reading selections from the Nectar of Devotion, they established that the spiritual master, although not God, should be honored as much as God, because he is the confidential servant of God. Several senior devotees spoke their heart's conviction, citing examples from their association with Prabhupada to prove that he had not rejected them. He was too kind. The sannyasis might feel rejected because of their own guilt, someone said, but they should not project their guilt on others. The false teachings, however, had dealt a blow from which many devotees would need time to recover. Newcomers at the festival were especially unsettled, but the cloud of gloom that had hung over New Vrindavan was now lifted, thanks to Srila Prabhupada's timely letter. The sannyasis admitted their confusion. The GBC then phoned Kirtananda Swami in Tokyo and told him that Prabhupada's letter had resolved most of the problems, but that the sannyasis still held their misconceptions. Hearing this, Prabhupada felt his suspicions confirmed. Certain disciples had been contaminated by the poisonous philosophy from India. Consequently, material desires for power and control had overwhelmed them, even in Prabhupada's presence. Turning to Tamal Krishna, Sudama, and the three sannyasis with him, Prabhupada asked what they thought should be done. With the previous day's philosophic drilling still sharp in their minds, they suggested that anyone teaching Mayavada philosophy should not be allowed to stay within ISKCON. Prabhupada agreed. If these sannyasis continue to preach Mayavad philosophy, he said, they should not be allowed to stay in his temples, but should go out and preach on their own. Tamal Krishna conveyed this message to the GBC in the US, and Prabhupada was satisfied that the problem would be adjusted. He had created his GBC to handle such matters. On September 2nd, Prabhupada wrote Hamsaduta in Germany. Regarding the poisonous effect in our society, it is not a fact. It is a fact, and I know where from this poison tree has sprung up, and how it affected practically the whole society in a very dangerous form. But it does not matter. Prahlad Maharaj was administered poison, but it did not act. Similarly, Lord Krishna and the Pandavas were administered poison, and it did not act. I think in the same parampara system that the poison administered to our society will not act if some of our students are as good as Prahlad Maharaj. I have therefore given the administrative power to the governing body commission. To Hayagriva in New Vrindavan, Prabhupada wrote, I am very glad to know that the GBC is actively working to rectify the subversive situation which has been weakening the very foundation of our society. All you members of the GBC, please always remain very vigilant in this connection so that our society's growth may go on unimpeded by such poisonous elements. Your preaching in New Vrindavan, as well as intensified study of our literatures with seriousness, is very much encouraging. Please continue this program with vigor and re-establish the solidity of our movement. From the beginning, I was strongly against the impersonalists, and all my books stress on this point. So my oral instruction as well as my books are all at your service. Now you, GBC, consult them and get a clear and strong idea. Then there will be no more disturbance. The 4 sannyasis may bark, but still the caravan will pass. Prabhupada wrote to Swatsarup in Boston, I am very glad to know that you are not affected by the propaganda of the sannyasis that I am displeased with, all the members of the society. I am never displeased with any member. The worst part was over. Prabhupada thought, 4 months this problem had upset him and his writing. Relentlessly he had instructed his disciples for their own benefit and for the benefit of his movement. The disease had taken its toll, and that was unfortunate, but the devotees were being forced to turn to Prabhupada's books and apply their teachings, and that was the positive outcome. Now they should clearly understand the position of the spiritual master and never again be led astray by false philosophies or sentiment. Prabhupada's main business in Tokyo was with Dai Nippon. Considering him an important author and venerable religious monk, they had provided him a car and apartment. Each morning they sent a private car to drive Prabhupada to Imperial Palace Park, where he had to take his morning walk. Prabhupada liked the neatly planted trees and gravel walks, and he appreciated the habits of the Japanese people. As he would pass, elderly ladies would bow to him from the waist, and others would fold their hands respectfully, acknowledging his being a holy man. On the morning of Prabhupada's meeting with Dai Nippon, he came out of his apartment with Tamal Krishna and Devananda Maharaj and got into the back seat of a Dai Nippon company car. The car proceeded through the early morning streets, and Prabhupada chanted his Gayatri mantra silently. A Dai Nippon junior executive escorted Prabhupada and his 2 disciples into an elevator and up to a spacious room with a long conference table. Prabhupada's guide cordially offered him a seat at the table, and Prabhupada sat down, with Tamal Krishna and Devananda Maharaj on either side. Soon they entered Dai Nippon's 6 top executives, including the corporation president. Each stood behind his respective chair, and each in turn, beginning with the president, bowed silently from the waist and presented his calling card, addressing Prabhupada as Your Divine Grace. They introduced themselves, announced their posts, and took their seats. We are very honored to have you here, the president began. You are a great religious author, and it is our great privilege to be publishing your books. After the president had spoken briefly, tea was served. Prabhupada requested hot milk. Conversation was informal, and Prabhupada spoke of the importance of his mission and his Krishna-conscious literature. No one discussed business, however, and the Dai Nippon executives soon excused themselves. They would meet again the next morning. When Prabhupada was again alone in the room with his disciples and the junior executive who had escorted him, he asked the young Japanese, So what is your goal in life? By way of answer, the man gathered up all the business cards that lay scattered before Prabhupada on the table and stuck them, with the president's on top, then the first vice presidents, and so on, putting his own card in its place on the bottom. He then dramatically removed his card from the bottom of the stack and slapped it on top, a graphic answer to Prabhupada's question. Prabhupada smiled. To become president of the company, he said, was temporary. All material life was temporary. He explained on the basis of Bhagavad Gita that the body was temporary and that the self was eternal. All the identities and positions people hankered after were based on the bodily conception of life and would one day be frustrated. The purpose of life, therefore, was not to become the temporary president of a temporary corporation within the temporary material world, but to realize the eternal soul's relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and gain eternal life. Prabhupada spoke for almost half an hour while the man listened politely. At the next day's meeting, negotiations began. The conference room was different, the table smaller, and 3 of Dai Nippon's international sales representatives sat opposite Prabhupada. Prabhupada presented his price, $1.35 per book. "Oh, Your Divine Grace," one of the salesmen exclaimed, "it is not possible for us to give this price. We will lose too heavily. We cannot afford it." They explained their position, quoting paper costs and other expenses. Prabhupada began to speak about his mission, ISKCON's book distribution. He said, was a charitable work for the benefit of all humanity. ISKCON distributed these books for whatever donations people were able to make, and he received no profit in or royalties. It was spiritual education, the most valuable literature. In any case, Prabhupada said in closing, "You deal with my secretary in this regard," and he sat back in his chair. The burden was on Tamal Krishna. Tamal Krishna began by saying that Prabhupada had been too kind because ISKCON could actually never pay such a high price. He then quoted a price 40 cents lower per book than Prabhupada's quote. "Mr. Tamal," the salesmen were again upset, "please reconsider your point." A polite argument ensued. Suddenly Prabhupada interrupted, presenting himself as an impartial third party. He said he would settle the difference that had arisen between his secretary and the salesman. "I have heard both sides," he said, "and I feel that the price should be $1.25 per book. That's all." "Yes, Your Divine Grace," the salesman agreed. "That is right." After further negotiations, Prabhupada agreed on a contract that included a reprint of Volume 1 and a first printing of Volume 2 of Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, 2 issues of Back to Godhead, a Hindi issue of Back to Godhead, a new book, Sri Ishopanishad. ISKCON had to pay only $5,000 cash, and Dai Nippon would deliver everything on credit. Prabhupada held a feast at his apartment for the Dai Nippon executives, who especially liked the samosas and pakoras. They presented Prabhupada with a watch and continued to see his comfort during his stay in Tokyo. Prabhupada also met a Canadian-born Japanese boy, Bruce, who was seriously interested in Krishna consciousness. Prabhupada invited him to come and join him in India, and the boy eagerly agreed. I'll stop here. This is also the end of the chapter, A Threat to ISKCON. Any questions or comments? Srila Prabhupada ki